go take command of USS Cole, I really can define it down for me to a couple of key things. First and foremost is integrity. Everybody in here talks about it. Everyone else in here uses the word and they say, well, it's just doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. To me, that's ethics. When you define integrity, you do all those things regardless of the consequences. And these days, given the political environment in our country, choosing that right path to do what is right for the district, for Maryland, for the nation, is not going to be a difficult choice. To step into that arena and make the choice that you want to run for office, to set aside any life aspirations because you see a bigger calling, makes a huge difference. When I was fortunate to take command, I said 3 great words: I relieve you, and I carried out a centuries-old time-honored tradition. I had about a year to get that ship ready for deployment. When I got it ready, I had a vision. Just like Dan's got a vision for the district, I had a smaller vision for my ship at the time, and that vision was really self-contained. It was to get that ship ready to go out to the high seas, conduct sustained combat operations to safeguard our national security interests. That can be a somewhat intimidating thing, but at the same token, I'd spent a career getting ready for it. You spend your life and it's amazing how many things will come together at the same point to be able to allow you to do that. So when I took command, got the ship ready, we deployed. First thing we did was go over to the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, we suffered for 4 miserable weeks. We had to suffer with the sailors through Barcelona, Spain, Villefranche, France, Valletta, Malta, Costa, Slovenia. We had stuff duty when you have to join the Navy and actually do go out there and see the world. But eventually we'd have to go into the Middle East. Our job was to enforce United Nations sanctions. On the way there, we had a brief stop for fuel in this little port called Aden, Yemen. We pulled in early in the morning on the 12th of October, tied the ship up in the middle of the harbor, commenced taking on fuel around 10:30. 11:15, I'm sitting in my cabin when there was a thunderous explosion. You could feel all 505 feet and 8,400 tons of guided missiles destroyer suddenly and violently thrust up into the right. We seemed to hang for a second in the air. The ship was bending and flexing and twisting in this odd 3-dimensional motion, and as we slid back down into the water, lights went out, ceiling tiles came out, everything on my desk had popped up about a foot and had slammed back down. In that defining moment, I knew we had been attacked just by the direction the ship had been thrust. I grabbed a 9mm, loaded it, chambered around, decocked it, grabbed 2 clips of ammunition, went out to go defend my ship. We didn't know if we were going to be boarded, didn't know if there was going to be another attack. In that defining moment, I remembered standing in this small little town in Maryland, in the center of this little courtyard called Tecumseh Court, or T-Court, as I raised my right hand and swore an oath to support and defend my nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I'd be willing to give my life. Faced with that moment, everything was brushed aside, because only 2 things mattered to me in that moment. What do I have to do to defend my ship? What do I have to do to defend my crew? Within seconds, we were able to determine that the ship, in fact, while sustaining a massive amount of damage, wasn't going to sink. I had already gone to the bridge and arranged for boats to come out to us to try and get wounded sailors off the ship. We were able to very quickly prioritize and contain the damage to 2 of the 4 engineering spaces. The triage effort that was ongoing was absolutely amazing. When I got to the middle of the ship inside, headed toward the central control station to really get the briefing on what was going on with damage, all I could see all the way down the passageway were wounded. Wounds were typical: broken bones, shrapnel, cuts, scrapes, bruises, and shock. 2 to 3 sailors were working on every one of the wounded to save their lives. The other half of the sailors were doing what they could to keep the ship afloat. As I looked down at those sailors, I would have given an eye tooth to talk to every one of them, but I couldn't. They were not my #1 priority. It was a bigger job. I had to save my ship first, because if you don't save the ship, it doesn't matter what the crew's going to want. In many ways, you can already see the parallels with what's going on in our nation. You have to save things 1 district, 1 state at a time to get the ship estate righted and headed in the right direction. Once we knew we weren't going to sink, it's the triage effort. How well were we doing? Already I'd looked over and my most experienced person for damage control on the ship was wounded. He called me over, I bent down, he grabbed my hand and said, I don't think I'm going to make it. And I looked at him and I said, I don't want to hear that, Senior Chief. Your wife, Lisa, who is the ship's ombudsman, as well as your two little blonde-haired kids, want to see their daddy again. He had a compound fracture that had resulted when they found him. His boot was near his ear. They straightened his leg out. He kept it, survived. I would later do his retirement ceremony in a little town called Elk River, Minnesota. And as a sign of dedication, which I have no doubt Dan's got the same thing, I went up there in January of 2005. You know how cold it gets in Elk River, Minnesota in January? That first day, we would get the ship stable in about 2 hours. We would also evacuate 33 wounded off the ship in 99 minutes, and of those 33 wounded, 32 would survive. That's the level of training. That's why we dedicate the resources that we need to so that the military can train and train and train. Because in a moment of crisis, you don't have the luxury to think through a problem. You have time to react to it the way it's trained. Talk to a Secret Service agent and they'll tell you again and again, it's the muscle memory that allows them to do exactly what my sailors did. In that defining moment, the announcing system for the ship was knocked offline, the backup system failed, the alarm system failed. There was no way to tell the crew what had happened, where to go, what to do. And what had they done? They fell back on their training, reacted, went out, and saved that ship and saved their crew. We knew that we could keep that ship afloat, and we did it for 17 days. Eventually, we would get the ship out of the port, onto that big heavy lift ship, Blue Marlin, but we did a few things on the way out of port. We had restored that announcing system for the ship. As we're getting towed out, we had a stereo system set up on the flight deck. I turned to my executive officer and I said, play the first song. And the first song we played was the Star Spangled Banner. I wanted that song coming off our ship, sending a signal to the Yemenis people that despite what had happened to us, we were going to leave with our head held high. As we went by 2 Yemeni Navy patrol boats, the crew, being professionals, had gotten into their full dress uniforms, had come out on deck, stood at attention, and rendered honors to us. And what did we do as professionals? We returned those honors to them. Then I played the second song, Star Spangled Banner again. Second time though, a little bit of a twist. It was the Jimi Hendrix version. But then we turned to go out of the port. I looked as the captain and I said, you know, XO, the crews are good. Let them play what they want. I was expecting a cultural signal of good American rock and roll. The next song they played was cranked up so loud that you couldn't even hardly understand what it was. I'm looking at it and saying, you know, I should have known as the captain, they're still sailors and be careful how much leash you give them. I wanted a cultural signal. What was the song the crew picked? Kid Rock, American Badass. Just a slightly different signal than the captain wanted to give these people. We would bring that ship back. And to give you some idea of what kind of a great nation we have, despite losing 17 sailors, despite 37 wounded, despite having a 40 by 40 foot hole in the side that was as if a giant had punched his fist in, moved it around, and pulled it back out. They brought that ship back, put a patch on her, floated her off, put her up on a dry land facility. 15 months later, she was back in the water, steaming toward Norfolk, Virginia, and she is back out there and has made her 6th deployment defending freedom since then. That's the greatness of the nation we have today. That's the greatness of people like Dan who want to contribute and keep our nation strong, keep us exceptional, and make us what we are today. Because it doesn't just happen overnight. It doesn't just happen in an instant. It takes an investment in time, in dedication, in prioritizing a nation's needs. Because as we all have seen, there's been a lot of discussion, especially with Syria and everything else. What are our national security interests today? How do we define them? How do we define what is truly strategic in nature for us as a country and what we should engage in? You draw a red line, you better be willing to back it up. If you're going to draw that red line and you want the international community to back you, then you better have articulated that to the international community before you ever start pulling the American people in. National security interests are not something that you play word games with. Be careful how we do it, because we have seen this slow devolution ever since this administration came in that is undermining the strength of our nation in many ways. And it is going to be because of your active engagement and the fact that people like Dan Bongino will take a look down, take a step forward, and be like Teddy Roosevelt and be that man in the arena. Because if we don't have those kind of people, and if we don't support him in getting there, this nation will continue down a path that we may not be able to recover from. So, each and every one of you, while you take the time and look at what you're going to do, stay engaged, stay involved. Because I will tell you right now, sitting back on that ship, my world distilled down to those two key elements. But at the end of the day, as we got closer to coming back to the United States, we had to take a step back and say, okay, how can we contribute? I looked at my crew, and I will tell you, I stay in touch with the vast majority of them through Facebook and other means almost every single day. Their accomplishments have been phenomenal. What was 18 and 19-year-old kids now are mothers, fathers, business owners, gun shop owners. One of my gunner's mates owns a gun shop out in Tennessee. And I'll tell you right now, every one of them knows what it takes to be part of a nation today. The families suffered an unbelievable loss. They grieve every day. As we come up on the 13th anniversary, it is painful for them as if it had happened just yesterday. Every year I make it back to go to the services in Arlington. But I will tell you right now, we as a nation can do it. Because we have people like Dan. We ran into each other, really got a chance to meet each other for the first time about, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago in the green room at Fox. And it really didn't click and connect with me. And all of a sudden, walking away, I was like, boy, now I know who that guy is. Okay, got it. That's amazing. I love Google. But again, I want to thank each and every one of you. While you just got the short story tonight, that short story encapsulates and captures why it is important to keep our nation strong, why it is important for each of us to work hard every single day and ask ourselves the question, okay, what did I do for my family today? What did I do for my community today? What have I done for my nation today? Because every day you need to figure out how you're going to contribute and do something, even if it's just learning something that you can use as a reference point later, because each of those contribute to making us the exceptional United States of America that is the best nation on the face of the earth and still represents freedom for millions of people around the world. So again, at this point, everyone didn't come here to hear me talk. They came here to let Dan come up here for a few minutes. But again, it was an honor and a privilege to share just a short snippet of my story and tell you why it is so important for me that I take the time to come up to these events. And the reason I do that is because I believe in my nation. I know what that sacrifice entails, and I know the consequences when you walk out into the tip of the spear and you don't give the people the tools they need to defend themselves. And I know Dan is never going to do that to us. So with you, sir.
Thank you.